We are fortunate to have with us Mr. Kiran Nagarkar in our studios today. Mr. Nagarkar is the winner of the Sahitya Academy Award for the year 2000 for his novel Cuckold. He is a bilingual writer and has, to his credit, 3 major novels. The first one was called Saat Sakam Tri Charis. The second one, which was written in English, is called Ravan and Eddie. And his latest book, of course, is Cuckold, published in 1997. And he is at work on another novel right now. And he's also a playwright and has to his credit at least 2 important plays and another screenplay. And we're going to talk to Mr. Nagarkar today about the writing process. Welcome, Kiran.
Thank you.
Tell us to begin with, how did you start writing? What made you want to write in the first place?
Let's say it was the art of being a misfit. I originally wanted, when I was in school, I wanted to be an actor. But I stammered so much. I mean, I was never sure of my language. So my brother said, why don't you take it easy, okay? You do your bachelor's and your master's, and then we'll think about whether you want to go in for acting or not. By that time, the stumbling had become so endemic that I thought, I think I should just let that go. So I didn't know what to do with myself, and I began to write short stories. And I'm sure they were dreadful short stories.
Where are they? We haven't seen them.
No, and anyway, by that time, I also had begun to go off the form for some curious reason. And, sorry, someone said that, we're going to bring out a new issue of Abhiruchi, which had been an established magazine from Baroda.
Edited by Dilip Chitri's father. Yes.
Purushottam Chitri. And I thought, well, why not try it? So I wrote one short story, a really short story of a page and a half, where there's this man who everybody is trying to, he's dead and they're trying to bury him. But they just can't do it. He always resurfaces. And then ultimately, it's one of my earlier cynical stories. They just get fed up and they kind of bury him in a deep well, and he's brought back because, the stink. He just won't stay buried. Then they go to God and tell him, we don't know what to do with this guy. And they don't talk in Marathi. How can you talk to God in Marathi? So they switch to English.
Oh, not to Sanskrit.
No, this is a modern God. I mean, do you remember my lines in Ravan and Eddie, where there is an aside or a meditation on languages, and where those who have
English,
those who have English, other has, and those who don't have English, other have nots. So in the same manner, these people, when they have to speak on an important occasion to a very important personage, they switch to English. And God is sitting on his throne, a little bit like the Air India Maharaja, and his feet don't quite touch the ground. And then they roll this guy forward, and he comes and finds himself under God's feet, and now God's feet touch the earth.
That's marvelous, like a pedestal.
Pedestal.
And almost like the dwarf under Shiva's foot,
Yes.
There's so many mythological implications.
Yeah. But that was the first short story in Marathi, at least.
And it cured your stammer.
It did, up to a point. But by that time, in the same issue, I had already begun to write Saat Sakam Tri Charis.
I see.
Yeah. And I had no clear notion as to what I was doing.
So how come you sort of started writing in Marathi after doing your BA and MA in English literature?
It is something of a major step. And fortunately, I did not realize that I was taking any kind of step. This is one of my strengths and tremendous weaknesses, I think, that I don't know what I'm getting into.
We'll come back to this point about your bilingualism, which I think is very crucial even to understanding the kinds of novels you're writing in English. But I want to go back to what you said about wanting to be an actor, because for 2 reasons. For one, that you did write plays.
Yes.
So is there a connection between those 2 things?
I really don't know. Again, the theatre form is something that I have realized that I'm going to eschew almost totally. I don't see much theatre now. When I was young, when I was in Ferguson College, I was so alone there because I went from Bombay and I went with my English, of course. And the Puneites, the dear Puneites, taught me a lesson which I really needed very badly. They said, I'm going to speak in Marathi for a second. Tula English yeto ka? Dao to tula. You know English?
I'll show you.
Yeah. So they just wouldn't have any converse with me. Boy, was it lonely. It was like being in a solitary.
But surely there were people in Ferguson who were very Anglophiliac, just as you all are.
Very, very few in those days. I mean, things have changed enormously. I have caught people holding hands in Ferguson College. Man, if you're seen within 10 feet of a girl, it was an occasion.
Okay, so we've come a long way, baby, as they say. But so the plays you're saying happened almost accidentally, or you went and saw a lot of plays in Pune?
No, I read a lot of O'Neill. I used to read a play a day.
Oh.
And then I begged a professor of ours to buy the really huge biography of O'Neill.
Yes.
And I realized that O'Neill really must have been the seminal influence in American theatre. Because, I mean, in many ways, even some of the movie making that we indulge in today is a result of what O'Neill did. I mean, where that long night that he talks about.
Yes.
And which becomes a sort of confessional.
Yes.
Where you wash your dirty linen in public. I mean, public meaning amongst the family members. This is something that we have, I mean, Hollywood has picked up, the Scandinavians have picked up. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf is the same scene, really.
Right.
You know.
And Vijay Tendulkar also?
Absolutely. But it was a kind of play that I deeply loved and respected, and yet I seem to have gone my own way. Because my first play is about the Mahabharata.
Correct. Eklavya, isn't it?
Eklavya is one of the characters from it. It takes some of the short stories from the Mahabharata and it puts them together under a perception, which is what I was trying to talk about, and the perception being anything that happens anywhere in the world, you and I are responsible for it.
Yes.
This I thought was very important to me because I kept seeing Germans and everybody else. Whenever something terrible happened, our first instinct is that, oh, but those were the Nazis, or that was somebody else. And I wanted to constantly place myself in the dark. The effect was quite the contrary, because now a playwright can only write a play, and the play, hopefully, is generally in the third person. I mean, in the sense that, talking about characters. And I have a very nasty piece of a chorus. I mean, he is soul destroying. He comes on so strong. I wanted him to sit on a swing, and he would be swinging away. I mean, not he would start that way. He would start talking really in an extremely amiable, confidential patter that he had, and he would tell you that, this is an old-fashioned play. Just relax. Can you see the proscenium here? And as he got nastier and nastier, he would start swinging, and he would go deep down into the audience and swing right back. But of course, none of this happened. You need money for this kind of thing. But what the play was interpreted to be by the very, very few people who read it. But some of them thought that I am kind of coming down on them or society. Not that I was putting myself first and foremost into the dark. And I was blaming myself for Vietnam and everything that happened. And of course what is happening here, in our country. And not necessarily on the political level itself, but even if there was an accident and we just turned our faces away.
You mean the play wasn't performed much?
No, it was not performed. For 17 years it stayed in limbo.
And what about the other play? What is this one called, this play?
This is called, look, I was switching to Marathi instantly. It was called Bedtime Story.
Bedtimes, exactly.
And it is the same title in Marathi also. As you know, the word great, I suspect, is a Marathi word. It's vaguely borrowed. Put that aside. it had tremendous censorship problems, and then it had extra legal censorship problems.
Oh.
And anytime Dr. Lagu or some other director started to go into put the play through its rehearsals, there were so many threats that
they had to withdraw.
Yeah, and the actors were forced to withdraw.
And the next play you wrote, was that performed?
That was performed. No, ultimately Bedtime Story also was performed.
Okay.
It was performed in Marathi and Hindi, and with a tremendous amount of money being put in by the actors themselves, because they believed in the project. After 17 years, which is really to their great credit. And let me say this very clearly, that it is a young man's play. It's an angry play.
Yes.
It is much toned down now. Now when we do it, it deals only with the Mahabharata, because it had parallels in modern times also.
Sure. And the next play?
The next play was called Kabira Sukai Karai.
Kabira Sukai Karai, another controversial figure in Indian history.
Yes. I've never found him controversial.
Controversial in the sense, a key figure, let me put it.
No, you're right. He is a controversial figure. Nobody knows who he belongs to, because we want to tear him apart, of course. Yes. And no, I would rather have him whole.
That's marvelous. Now, I wanted to ask you two questions in connection with what you've told us. One is the enormous amount of reading you did. Do you think that's important for a writer, to do lots of reading?
I'm very grateful to you, think that I have read a lot. But no, and I'm now very serious about this. I did read quite a bit, and as you would know very well, it is not a drop in the ocean, really. And you know, there's no modesty here. How can you ever catch up with reading?
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, don't you think that your interest in drama or in theatre or in being a playwright adds a dramatic quality to your writing? Because I find that there is an elocutory quality to, I mean, there's always people doing these perorations in your novels, you know, they take off and sometimes there are asides and there are insertions. So do you think that has something to do with your theatre experience? Or?
I'm sure it has. At the same time, don't discount movies. Makarand, I am a pure product of Hollywood. Everything that is Philistine and plebeian you'll find in me. So, no, but on a serious level, of course the theatre will matter enormously. And if you'll forgive the presumption, I think Shakespeare also would matter enormously.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought out the movie angle, I should say, because this book has two characters, and each of them has a favorite film.
Yes.
One is Dil De Ke Dekho, and that's Ravan, and Eddie sees this Elvis Presley film, I think.
Rock Around the Clock.
So, Rock Around the Clock.
Yeah.
So, and you use these as kind of motifs to talk about the intermixture, or you might say even the intercourse between two cultures. In some ways, I find that Ravan and Eddie in today's times, with the Christian bashing that's going on, is a deeply political book which talks about not just coexistence really, but all sorts of transformations and interfusions.
Makarand, you've just spoken about something which is so critical to the way I would work, because it is political also in a very different sense. The Sahitya Academy speech that I'm going to give is about, it's called we might as well live on different planets. And I think we have begun to live on different planets. And the wonderful thing about Ravan and Eddie, and I'm not talking about this as a quality of the book, a literary quality of the book, because I'm not about to praise my own work. What I'm trying to say very specifically is that these two young boys who are so busy trying to survive, they cross into each other's cultures, something that we no longer think is not only mandatory, but a great and joyous experience.
Absolutely. The one question I wanted to ask you about Ravan and Eddie, though, was that there is a certain kind of episodic narrative here, and characters and incidents that are introduced in the beginning are quite forgotten at the end. Now, is this deliberate? For example, at the beginning of the book, Parvati Pawar, that is Ravan's mother, is not only a very beautiful and a sensuous woman, but somebody who for some reason is sweating all the time. And then that's completely forgotten at the end of the book. And it almost seems as if Lali, the other woman who comes in and tries to usurp her place, becomes the sensuous woman, and to some extent she becomes the plain Jane, you know, the homebody, the homemaker kind of thing. So, and then there are, there's this whole thing with the, I think it's the Carvalho family, the appendix operation.
Yes, yes.
And then those characters are dropped completely.
Yeah.
Why were you doing that? Whereas I find that in Cuckold, all the characters are kept right
in focus throughout.
Yeah, throughout till the end.
Yeah. Part of it is deliberate, and part of it is a lack of vision. Okay. But let me get back to Parvati. No, I want to say one thing very clearly. If Parvati is sweating enormously, it's because she's in Bombay. She lives in a chawl, they don't have a fan in their house. And because her husband happens to be so incredibly lazy and so perverse that he will not work to support his family, it is Parvati who has to cook meals and supply them to the mill workers.
Sure. So
she makes it's a pittance, and which is, in the culture of poverty, this is a standard feature, that the woman must take over.
That's right.
Yeah?
But I'm just saying that the sweating was almost symbolic, just like, again, to use a comparison which may not work, because we know that you started this book in Marathi before Midnight Children was really published. But, Salim Sinai, well, his father's, different parts of his anatomy, or Salim Sinai's nose growing, large or small, etc. So the sweating seemed almost to be some kind of literary device, but later it was completely dropped.
Not as a defense, but if it comes across as a literary device, then I have really made a blunder. Okay?
Oh.
Because I am not into devices. I think there's a lot of anger there, which the humor tries to, if you want to be hard about or harsh about it, then it pretends to cover up. And the anger is that I'm not a feminist in that sense, I'm a writer. But just as I think that there is only one form of disrespect that we have for the poor, that we will not give them their dignity. And dignity can come through 3 meals, and dignity can come through giving them a toilet, dignity can come through giving them water round the clock, not have to wait for hours on end and not get it. And I'm amazed, as I say in the Water Wars, in that aside there, that, hey, the road rage in America ends up with people bumping each other off, right? And these good human beings, God bless them, they haven't been killing each other while waiting for hours at a time for water.
Okay, let's sort of come back to the creative process, because this program is for aspiring writers. Do you have a kind of routine? Do you sit down and try to write every day? Or how do you go about your, avocation as a writer?
Earlier, oddly enough, or maybe not so oddly, you mentioned writing as worship. It is peculiar. I'm extremely self-conscious about using words like that. At the same time, since you touched a raw nerve, I might write badly, okay? But that's me. But I don't know, I think writing is very special. And when I was young, of course, if you touched a book with your foot, my father would really, he didn't have a whip, that's why he didn't whip me, but he did many other things. But that is an aside. But yes, writing is important, and I'm afraid I have not been prayerful enough, and I have not been a good bhakta. I did advertising for a living. You can't make a living off writing unless you're lucky, and I would like everybody to be lucky. This I haven't.
Just as you want everyone to have water.
Yes, and I want everybody to be haves. But so that the money should be there. You should, because when we talk about bestsellers in India, we're really talking about people who sell 5,000 copies. And that's if you're damn lucky. That's a bit difficult. So I did advertising for a living, and I wanted to do it well. And I owed it to somebody else. So then, of course, I wanted to do it even better. So for 17 years, no, 12 years after Bedtime Story, I wrote nothing. Or only occasionally wrote something. Now too, Cuckold was written, I think, in spurts. I was very fortunate that I was able to write it and finish it. And sometimes I have worked, I suspect, 12 and sometimes even 14 hours.
Kiran, what is the impact of all these new gadgets? You know, word processors with simplified drafts and editing. I know that in your books you have these profuse words of thanks to people who went through drafts and drafts and typed and retyped them. But do you think this is going to change writing forever, the vocation, I mean the practice of writing?
No, I don't think the practice of writing will change. I hope it will bring far more ease. When I think of O'Neill, I must say to him towards the end, O'Neill couldn't write. I mean, it was terrible because he had so much more to write. Unfortunately, I come from a generation which falls between the two stools. I'm a very slow learner. I am trying to learn to type, and I do manage 3 lines in 2 hours. But no, but seriously, I would like to learn to type again. And right now, unfortunately, I handwrite.
What about dictation? A lot of writers used to dictate, including Dickens, I think.
Yeah, I'm not good at it. Because somewhere in one's convoluted mind, the fingers get into the act of thinking.
Yes. I mean, that's a very modernist way that that writing is a very special kind of activity, different from, you know, the oral, the vocal. The vocal and the written are very different.
And which is very sad because I so deeply revere the oral narration. You know, I mean, look, all the archetypes that you and I will talk about ultimately will come from Homer. You know.
Well, Kiran, talking about the oral traditions, we'd be very grateful if you could read some excerpts, maybe a minute or two, from both the books.
If I can find the page, I should have left a mark. I'm very sorry about that. Okay. If my voice gives, please bear with me. Along with religion, the other great divide in the C.W.D. Charles was language. Often the one got confused with the other. Hindus spoke Marathi, Catholics English. Konkani was still very much the lingua franca. In the Goan home, but outside the house, the younger people communicated almost entirely in English. English was the thorn in the side of the Hindus. Its absence was their cross, their humiliation, and the source of their lifelong inferiority and inadequacy. It was a severely debilitating and if not fatal lack that was not acknowledged, spoken of, or articulated. It was the great leveler. It gave caste Hindus a taste of their own medicine. It made them feel like untouchables. It also turned the tables. The former outcasts could now look down upon their Hindu neighbors. Chairman, he's a dirty bugger. 3 times I told him, I don't climb the tree to look at my size. I leave him alone. I asked him, give it in, but he didn't listen. So I gave him his hit. Stood in a haste like. The bugger began to cry like a baby, man. And he begged me like, but I didn't listen. I told him, you look at my size and I'll break your bone in balls. Grown English is easy to mimic, and an easy target for well-educated and affluent Bombayites. It is burlesque in plays, reviews, and films. Such niceties in caricature are lost on the Hindus from the C.W.D. Charles. Ask any one of them in an unguarded moment and he'll tell you that he would give his right hand, make it his left, to be able to speak like the people from the top floor, because there are only 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who have English and those who don't. Those who have English are the haves, and those who don't are the have-nots.
Thank you. That was wonderfully done. And if you don't mind, a passage from Cuckold as well.
This is going to be difficult to find. Anything that you have in mind? You want to read the Parijat tree or to
Yes, that would be marvelous.
This is about the tree, okay? This is the parijat tree which he himself has planted, and he takes these flowers in the morning, early in the morning. The Maharaj Kumar takes them, and while his wife is sleeping, he pours them over her. He's come back from the war. My tree is dying. There are plenty of leaves yet on the branches, and every morning there are still drifts of parijat blossoms on the dew-drenched ground. But I know that my friend has turned its back on me. I have no idea what unspoken covenant I have broken, what unwritten law of nature I have transgressed, or in what way I have disappointed my joyous companion of the mornings. Who knows what pain we cause our dearest ones? And yet I tell you true, however grave the error of my ways, it cannot compare with the hurt you inflict when you shrink at the sight of me. I can see you shriveling, the sap slowing down, the heart growing fainter. Even in terminal cases, the doctors have told me that if the will to live is strong, both the disease and death are kept in abeyance. Who or what killed you of your will? What is it, tree? Speak to me. You were like a 300-armed goddess, and your bounty was prodigal as a summer shower. I remember the leap of joy in your face and the goose pimples on your body the first morning after I returned from the Malwa campaign. 1,000 parijats leapt down and covered me. Not even the pet dogs I had when I was a child have missed me so and made me feel so welcome. And now, barely 10 weeks later, you're willing to fold your 300 hands, withdraw into your titled cocoon and bid goodbye to the concourse of creation, birds and worms and bees which nested in your breast. No fever, no bruises, no symptoms, and yet I know that something happened, something terrible. Can we talk this over? I guess not. You can't talk to someone's back to someone who stopped listening. I brought Defiki's manure and buried it under the topsoil. I turned the earth every 2 days. I water the ground myself. I have rushed back sometimes even during office hours like an anxious parent or lover. I have played you the flute for hours. I have hugged you tightly and said I will not let you go. You are but a fledgling shoot when I brought you from Kundelgarh. I don't know whether you missed home or the terrain and nourishment here are different from those where you were born. You almost died, but you didn't give up. You were a tough fighter. Do you know how young you were when you started flowering? Queens and princes and the most beautiful odalisks would stand and gaze in wonder. I thought when I grow old, I would sit in your shade and let your flowers drizzle on me. Has the thing I fear most happened? Is there death in my touch? I'm sorry I stumbled so much.
No, it's a very moving passage, in fact, and even while listening to it, I could relate to, in a sense, the emotion that was in your voice. That's it, students. As you can see, writing is not an easy profession to want to take up, but hard work. And it's that 99% of sweating that's going to help you, I suppose, as much as that 1% of inspiration. Thank you, Kiran, very much for being with us.
Thank you.